Hello. So, it is the early morning of April 26th, 2025. And on this day, UFC Fight Night, Garry versus Prates, will commence. So, I'd like to tell everybody that in honor of Carlos Prates' early victory, I will be chain smoking throughout the entire event. And if he loses, should I take my YouTube channel down and disappear? Maybe. Maybe I'll put up a poll or some shit. Who knows? Yeah, probably will. So it's all on the line, right? I'm joking, I'm not gonna do that. That's fucking retarded. Or is it? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, I had some things arise, and this video is very last minute, but that's actually better because it's not so last minute that, you know, there isn't time to lock in a couple of bets, consider some fights from an alternate perspective, and all the things that go into, you know, picking fights. Why would you pick fights, right? You know, why not just watch UFC or MMA in general and enjoy yourself? Right? What I'm saying is don't gamble. I don't encourage gambling. Alright? Do not encourage gambling. I want you to never gamble, ever. This isn't even my betting advice video. But, you know, it has to be said. Always. Definitely don't gamble. So, the first fight on this card is Joselyne Edwards versus Chandler. So, women's bantamweight fight, Joselyne Edwards, you know, definitely the more aggressive of the two. Definitely, if either of them is the one that looks for a finish, it's Edwards. A little bit more power, not particularly elegant in any area of fighting, has missed weight, in her last fight, I believe, by 3 pounds. Why does that not matter necessarily? Chandler missed weight in her last fight by 5, well, 6, but 5 with the extra pound that is allotted. She also looked sloppy, obese, even. Chandler has never been particularly talented, anywhere, really. She eats strikes, her defense is non-existent, basically. You know, and, you know, her style is almost like, you know, just without attempting to block anything, just power through, and you know, and it doesn't work. You know, in her last fight, despite having, 5-6 pounds on her opponent, she was, you know, systematically just broken down. I think it was a 30-27. Joselyne Edwards, you know, she has her finishes. She, you know, she's not particularly impressive. She could maybe crack the rankings. I mean, it basically just comes down to which one of them is, you know, is gonna strike better. Maybe get a takedown. Probably not do anything with it in terms of a finish. But I think it's Joselyne Edwards. One thing to consider though is that not only did Chelsea Chandler not miss weight, but she came in under 2 pounds at 134. Joselyne Edwards took the extra pound. So, I mean, both fighters made weight. It's possible that Chelsea Chandler has made a concerted effort to never miss weight and that she's been through a training camp where we're going to see a whole new acumen of striking and, you know, potentially grappling and, you know, etc., etc. The thing is, I don't think she has the raw talent or ability in her necessarily. I think Joselyne Edwards may lose the first round if Chelsea Chandler is slightly improved, you know, because Edwards may be approaching this fight just going through the motions. She loses the first round, she'll come back in the second and the third. I'm fairly confident in Joselyne Edwards, although, you know, it is a WMMA fight. And the only fight on this card that I actually can't find any true excitement in, which is rare because most UFC cards have, you know, littered within them those types of fights. You know, and then you get the fights that are like on paper, you know, look terrible, and then they wind up being like, you know, performance bonus earning bangers and shit and all the fucking things. So, the next fight on the card. The next fight on this card is alrighty, yeah, Roberto Romero versus Timmy Cuamba. Now, this is this is kind of an iffy fight. Both of these guys are nothing special, but I mean, Roberto Romero lost to David Onama. They're featherweights. He was also fighting on this card, far closer to the main event. So basically, you know, I mean, this is a very hard fight to pick. Timmy Cuamba's had 2 UFC fights, lost both of them. He took Blackshear to a split decision. Lucas Almeida beat him. Now, like, one thing about Cuamba is, you know, he doesn't really seem to have... He doesn't seem to have any real defensive striking, and so if an opponent is aggressively striking at him, he kind of just, you know... I mean, he's, you know, not to say that he's, you know, not to say that he's like, what's his name, that Tamarov knocked out and then just got knocked out again. But the flyweight, the hell's his name? I can't remember. Analogies that don't go anywhere. Jesus. Anyway, the point is that, yeah, Timmy Cuamba, he gets fucking shook by, somebody aggressively striking. So I think if Roberto Romero pushes the pace on him, I mean, that's all he's got to really do. Trying to see something, because Timmy Cuamba just fight recently. Yeah, he fought Lucas Almeida. Okay, yeah, I remember this fight. So basically Lucas Almeida won. And can't remember if I took him to win. But yeah, Timmy Cuamba shot 5 takedowns. He landed 2. He won the round he won because of that. Didn't really do anything on the ground. He didn't really know. It seemed like he wasn't. He seemed like he took down in frustration, and basically was able to rack up control time and snatch around. But he doesn't seem to have any real ability to adjust at all, honestly. And Roberto Romero, there was the Onama fight was his debut in the UFC, which he did lose. Much higher caliber of opponent than either of the fighters Cuamba fought. But it was at 30-27. He did put Onama on the ground early on, and he has power in his hands for sure. Jesus, the pre-fight odds of that fight were he was a plus 1,000 underdog, Romero. He proceeded to get destroyed by Onama after some very early success. But he attempted to clinch. He was just outclassed, against Onama. Against Timothy Cuamba, he is gonna be more in his element, I think. It's an iffy fight, but honestly, Cuamba just doesn't really have. How do I say it? Cuamba just has nowhere to go with, he seems to fight almost spastically. In both of his UFC fights, he any offensive striking or takedowns that he manages to achieve are done almost out of panic. He really isn't. He just really isn't the best fighter, or even really much of a fighter, in my opinion, so far in his career. So I'm gonna take Roberto Romero. Next fight, Jaqueline and Amorim versus the beautiful but sadly untalented Polyana Viana. And I say that with love because she isn't the worst. However, she is consistently outclassed by fighters who are, who just are, they're ranked higher, and they're ranked higher for a reason. Anytime Polyana Viana has come up against a real opponent, at least in the last 3 years, or ever, to be honest, she just gets dominated. What Jillian Robertson did to her, January of last year, was just an utter decimation. Before that, she was submitted by Yasmin Lucindo, who, is okay. She did knock out Jinyu Fry, 47 seconds into the first round of that fight, which, good for her, right? She took Tabitha Ricci to a unanimous decision. She did lose, though. She's submitted by Veronica Hardy, so, she has a couple of submission wins against Mallory Martin, Emily Whitmer. Nobody even really noteworthy. Jacqueline Amorim, on the other hand, Jacqueline Amorim had a long string of victories in LFA, I guess, right? Yeah, I actually watched some tape on her because it was and it was so, it was so clear, the stark difference between Amorim and Polyana Viana, that I just posted a short video of Polyana Viana and Alex Pereira just giggling and wrestling and well, it was jiu-jitsu, she's in his guard in their kitchen, and then cut to Amorim brutally submitting this one girl from LFA. Jacqueline Amorim has submissions that are beyond impressive. So back in 2021, Taisha Gandhi, Amorim got this girl to the ground and just ground and pounded her until she rolled over so that she could rear naked choke her, right? And she proceeded to fight for the belts in LFA, won it by a first round knee bar submission, defended it by a first round armbar submission, debuted in the UFC, lost the decision to Sam Hughes. A lot of fighters lose their first UFC fight and go on to become champions even. Her next fight against Montserrat Ruiz got a knockout with 19 seconds left in the third round. Corey McKenna submitted Vanessa Demopoulos, rather. Disgrace. That Vanessa is. About the card last week or whatever, 3 weeks ago. She submitted Vanessa Demopoulos in the first round. Amorim hunts for submission. She's trying to kill or crush the esophagus of her opponent, and that's how it's gonna be. And I just hope that Polyana's face and body make it out of it okay, but it might not happen. It might be because it might just be strikes until Viana just submits and is able to be submitted. Jaqueline Amorim, definitely the first lock on this card. That's it. Malcolm Wellmaker versus Cameron Saaiman. A lot of people disagreeing on this fight. A lot of people seeing something in Malcolm Wellmaker that would lead them to believe that he's going to step into the octagon in his first UFC fight and defeat Cameron Saaiman. Now, he had a good Contender Series fight, knockout. He has a series of knockouts. Take a closer look, right? His Contender Series fight, similar to that Vicente Luque versus Themba Gorimbo fight. A man walks into a fist, right? He was on the back foot against his opponent. His opponent was trying to close the distance. Wellmaker's again, almost back to the cage, and saw his opening. I think it was a right straight that he got the knockout with. Not a crazy level of talent on display, honestly. A lot of people think otherwise, but before that, he fought in regional promotions, including Conflict MMA, where he won the belts. Now, that fight is one of the only fights he's had, other than his Contender Series fight, with an opponent that's not an 0-1 or 0-2 opponent, right? Taylor Moore is who he fought. Taylor Moore, I believe, was 10-7 though going into that fight, which is a terrible record anyway. But at least an experienced fighter. That Trevor Moore with a 10-7 record took Malcolm Wellmaker to his majority decision win. So watching that fight, Wellmaker, I don't know if it's a lack of speed or just being puzzled at what to do with against a fighter that can defend, whose guard he can't penetrate. But in the case of Cameron Saaiman, right, a lot of people are writing Cameron Saaiman off because of his last fight, where Peyton Talbot knocked him out, right? It happens, right? Peyton Talbot, despite being a stripper and among other things, and losing to Raoni Barcelos and all that, is actually a very talented fighter, right? Before that, Cameron Saaiman lost to Christian Rodriguez, who had a huge, enormous amount of weight on him. Rodriguez missed weight by 4 pounds, and Rodriguez is naturally much heavier than Cameron Saaiman. This is a bantamweight fight. Rodriguez is now fighting at featherweight. It was a unanimous decision. Cameron Saaiman just, he got, he just, he couldn't overpower Christian Rodriguez, who, in the actual octagon probably had 20 pounds on him, if not more. Before that, Cameron Saaiman was on a hot streak, against, not the best of competition, although, Terrence Mitchell, who's 14-4, it was Mitchell's debut. He went on to get knocked out by Raul Rosas Jr., but Saaiman finished him in the first round by knockout. Majority decision against Mana Martinez. The thing is with Cameron Saaiman, he's deceptively fast and deceptively powerful for what he looks like. I mean, he looks very frail. Looks like a flyweight. His first UFC fight, he against I think Steven Cazo. Yeah. He basically wound up getting a knockout after taking Cazo to the ground, scrambling. Very good instincts on display. Taking the back and ground and pounding, from behind. His instincts are very good. He needs this win. That's a huge part of this. But also, I think he's just better everywhere than Michael Wellmaker. A lot of people disagree with me. A lot of people think Wellmaker is going to come out, he's going to sleep Cameron Saaiman like Peyton Talbot did. Malcolm Wellmaker's not Peyton Talbot. He's not even Christian Rodriguez. Not that we know of, right? Is it possible he debuts like Kevin Vallejos or Jacoby Smith or, one of the rare fighters to step into the octagon after a Contender Series win and actually duplicate that Contender Series fight? Yeah, it's possible. Not really against Cameron Saaiman, I don't think. I think Cameron Saaiman has much more, much more well-rounded, has deceptive power, better grappling, is faster in general, and I think he's gonna be able to figure out Wellmaker fairly easily. I really don't. It's like, do I see Wellmaker's path to victory? Sure, but Cameron Saaiman would have to make so many mistakes. I just don't think it happens. So yeah, I'm gonna take Cameron Saaiman. We have a lock on the next fight. It's Blackshear versus Alatengheili. Chinese names, they just merge. What is this? How do you say it? Alatengheili, whatever. The guy that Blackshear is going to defeat. Who honestly, he lost to Chris Gutierrez. He does have a bit of knockout power. He debuted on a knockout in the UFC. He beat Chad Annalier, which is a respectable win, right? Chris Gutierrez took Chris Gutierrez to unanimous decision loss. He's not nothing, but he doesn't. He's not a grappler on the level of Blackshear. Now Blackshear was, after being slept by Montel Jackson in 19 seconds, or 18 seconds, actually. He came back against Cody Stamann, first round submission. Cody Gibson, who is very big for the division. Blackshear, 5'10" at bantamweight is not small either. But, Gibson had a lot of size on Blackshear and was, was very resilient, in that fight. I was watching MMA Guru's video, and he seemed to think that you know, the Blackshear, you know, just looked terrible on the feet in that fight, which I disagree with. I think that Cody Gibson, you know, did a lot of hugging against the cage, and Damon Blackshear, you know, who is a wrestler, got him to the ground, you know, locked up a submission, did what he had to do, you know, with, you know, just under a minute left in the second round. I mean, I don't think that was a particularly difficult fight for Blackshear. And, I don't see him losing this fight. I don't see him getting knocked out. I don't see him being, you know, I don't see his opponent, as I'll call him, Alatengheili. Alatengheili. Oh my god, I don't think highly of Alatengheili. So yeah, no, he's not gonna be able to stop Blackshear's takedowns. It's just like, you know, it's gonna be a submission for Blackshear, almost certainly. You know, he's 5'5" though, to Blackshear's 5'10". You know, at bantamweight with 6-inch reach disadvantage. I mean, you know, he's a sturdy fighter, but he's not gonna be able to. He's not gonna be able to beat Blackshear. It's just not. He would have to strike with such precision and stuff every takedown the Blackshear's gonna shoot. That, you know, it's so unlikely that I'm going to lock Blackshear. All right, next fight: John Castaneda versus Chris Gutierrez. So this fight, I'm gonna go with John Castaneda, and I think John Castaneda is a bit underrated, where Chris Gutierrez is overrated. I mean, you know, like Chris Gutierrez, you know, it's like, yeah, he sawing it on, couldn't finish him, but he might as well have. That fight was dominant performance. He beat Quang Lee, which is not really saying much. He did beat Blackshear's opponent too, Alatengheili, but he lost to Pedro Muniz. Knocked out Frankie Edgar, who was retiring. You know, we have another retirement fight in the coming event of this card, but yeah, Frankie Edgar, his retirement fight. He wasn't Frankie Edgar anymore. I mean, you know, first round knockout. You know, they handed it to Chris Gutierrez. They could have handed it to anybody else. You know what I'm saying? John Castaneda, on the other hand, it's a bantamweight fight. He's 5'6", to Gutierrez's 5'9", with a 4-inch reach advantage, which doesn't matter actually in this fight because of the way that Castaneda fights. He does throw calf kicks, but he also strikes, and he strikes with combinations. His last fight was against Daniel Marcos, who's undefeated, and also went on to beat Adrian Yanez in a split decision that was, you know, deserved, definitely. But Daniel Marcos is a serious opponent, and Castaneda definitely had him on the back foot for a lot of that fight. He's got decision wins over Kyung Ho Kang. He was leaders from Road TFC, but and Road TFC, by the way, is like from tough contender series and Road TFC probably brings in the toughest fighters, to be honest. And it's, you know, it's probably the least watched of the three for sure. The Muin Gaffarov win that John Castaneda has is definitely impressive. Seeing as how Gaffarov just went on to beat Rinya Nakamura, hand him his first loss, that has aged very well. And the thing with Castaneda is his output. He's very aggressive. He throws calf kicks. His boxing is on point as well. He submitted Miles Johns that was 3 years ago, but Miles Johns is no joke at all. And he's fought in the UFC for a while. In terms of his first fight he lost to Nathaniel Wood by decision. He's been finished. He was finished once. He was finished by Daniel Santos, but I don't see Gutierrez being able to overpower him or to outpoint him. I think Castaneda is too aggressive. His cardio is good. I think he overwhelms Gutierrez. Gutierrez just he's never particularly impressed me. He's not ever really pushed the pace on anybody. He's it's like he gets somebody that he can beat. He just kind of just cautiously strikes a lot of time. I mean, he'll push the pace a little bit, on somebody like Quang Lee, but I don't see him beating Castaneda, who is very aggressive, who goes in striking first, throws combinations, has very good fight IQ when it comes to adjustments, like in the Marcos fight. So I'm gonna go with John Castaneda. Taking more underdogs than usual on this fight card, but Evan Elder versus Gage Young. Evan Elder wins, man. He's good. Evan Elder's good. He's better than I think people recognize. I mean, he's 2-2 in the UFC, but Preston Parsons was his first opponent, unanimous decision loss. There's a doctor stoppage in his second fight, but it was against Nazim Sadikov, and he did really well, actually. He's definitely aggressive. His striking is really good. His takedown defense is very good. And his grappling is actually pretty top shelf. He submitted Darius Flowers in his last fight, the second round. If I remember correctly, the takedown in that fight, it was a standing clinch, and he wrapped his leg around Flowers to take him to the ground, which Evan Elder's he's decent, right? He's decent. Gage Young is not decent. Gage Young, he went the distance with Cullen Salkild, who went on to knock out Angelo Jubilee, which is not the hardest thing. Didn't knock him out cold, but Salkild's of a different caliber. So he lost his Contender Series fight. He got a knockout in a regional promotion, Fighting Alliance Championship, and off of that subsequent knockout, he got signed by the UFC. This is a short notice fight for him. On short notice, replacing the very badly behaved prior opponent of Evan Elder. Gage Young can't do it. He's not gonna, it's not his night. In fact, Evan Elder, given the short notice replacement of opponents and what I honestly could see to be improvement with each fight, I'm gonna call Elder a lock, and if he loses, I'll be very surprised, angry even. Next fight is Matt Schnell versus Jimmy Flick. Let's go, Matt Schnell versus Jimmy Flick. So, Matt Schnell's been treated very badly by his opponents in his last 3 fights. So I think he was submitted by Cody Durden most recently. He was the guy before that who Steve Erceg knocked out to step over and get a title shot. Before that, Nicolas knocked him out. He did submit Sumaderji before that. He was submitted by Brandon Royval. I mean, you know, he's been finished a lot. And his chin is, like, you know, just absolute thin glass, right? You know, split decision win over Tyson and Pantoja, of course, knocked him out. You know, but he does have, you know, a string of submission wins. He's a grappler, for the most part, you know, when he's not getting knocked out. The thing is, why am I going to take Matt Schnell? I'm going to take Matt Schnell because Jimmy Flick is even worse. Even worse. How is that possible? How is that possible when he took Nate Manis to a split decision? Or no, I'm sorry. He went the distance with Nate Manis. He subbed Malcolm Gordon, which, I mean, there's something there. Knocked out by Alessandro Costa. Knocked out by Charles Johnson in the first round. That's not the worst thing, but he was also subbed by Cody Durden back in 2020. First round. You know, I mean, Jimmy Flick just, I don't understand. He's 17-8, which is like, you know, it's not quite a WMMA record, but it's approaching one. Basically, I just don't see him possibly winning this fight. He's gonna knock Matt Schnell out. Schnell needs this victory. Like, he really needs it. Like, now, does that necessarily matter? I mean, how many fights, I mean, off the top of my head, whenever I think of a fighter who's, like, you know, who definitely knows that he's, you know, about to lose his contract if he doesn't get a win, and still just doesn't get a win, like, in a very sheepish way, it's Jamie Pickett, who was Bo Nichols' first opponent, and then went on to lose to Eric Anders. He's a middleweight, or he was. But, yeah, is it safe to call Jimmy Flick the Jamie Pickett of flyweight? Whichever one of them loses this fight is getting cut, maybe both of them. But, no matter what happens. But, I think Matt Schnell, I mean, you know, this is probably going to be, you know, a grappling fight, to be honest. And, I mean, it's hard. It's hard. They're both terrible. It's so bad. Like, so bad, bro. So, you know, it's gonna be matched now. It has to be. Like, yeah, Jimmy Flick. It's like, see, if my anonymous friend was here, you know, he would literally just roll through this fight, because it's like, you know, it's like, alright, like, who are you taking over the two of these? It's like, pick one, because it's like, that, you know. But, you know, try to be a little bit more analytical. I mean, Matt Schnell, he's had some, you know, he does have a decent way of, you know, lunging into a takedown. Jimmy Flick has very little takedown defense, although, yeah, Matt Schnell, going with Matt Schnell. Alright, main card, nice. Ikram Aliskerov versus Andre Muniz. Okay, Andre Muniz is slow, compared to Aliskerov, definitely. He's had a few good fights in the UFC, more than a few actually. His jiu-jitsu is very good. He submitted Eric Anders in 2021, beat Uriah Hall, He was submitted by Brendan Allen. He was knocked out by Paul Craig in 2023. Which is, I mean, that Paul Craig was not the Paul Craig that beat both Jamal Hill and Ankalaev. His most recent fight was on the Song Gutierrez card, which was at the end of 2023. Took Jun Young Park to a split decision. Now, Andre Muniz at middleweight, you know, he had promise for a while, but I think his best days are definitely behind him. Ikram Aliskerov, despite the knockout loss to Robert Whittaker, who he just simply wasn't ready for, you know, his first round knockout wins against Alves, who's, I mean, a terrible fighter, but and Phil Hawes. You know, he's got a lot of speed. He has knockout power, obviously. You know, I think that you know, Andre Muniz is gonna try to make this a grappling fight. I mean, you know, where Aliskerov can handle that. You know, if he gets taken down. But, you know, I think he'll try to keep it on the feet. I think he's going to try, you know, he's going to go for an early knockout. And Andre Muniz can be knocked out. He can also just be overwhelmed with strikes and just be completely overpowered, you know, and, you know, lose round after round. I don't see it for Muniz whatsoever. And, you know, I'm going to say Aliskerov's a lock. Next fight. Randy Brown versus Nicolas Dalby. This fight is interesting because Randy Brown makes things very razor thin sometimes. You know, I mean, the Brian Battle fight, he couldn't, you know, he just couldn't. That was almost like a willpower display, and Brian Battle won. Changed up his game plan mid-fight, won by split decision. I don't think it was a robbery. Before that, the Zaleski dos Santos fight, that he won a unanimous decision, Randy Brown did, but that was such a close fight that, you know, I had no idea who they were going to give it to. And I think it went 30-27, but, like, the rounds were very, very hard to score. I mean, you know, in my opinion. But, 29-28, yeah. Brown outstruck him, 67-26 on strikes, 2 submission attempts to, Dos Santos' 1. But, Dos Santos took him down 4 times. And Randy Brown, if he gets taken down or, you know, even held against the cage, he does not have the best takedown defense. Now, he knocked out Muslim Salikov, which, you know, honestly, Salikov went on to score the spinning back kick knockout. After that, Salikov was far from finished, you know, which is what I thought going into that fight. But Dalby is very hard to figure out sometimes. I mean, it's like, will Randy Brown be able to? I mean, Randy Brown's got a huge height advantage. I wish they would show leg reach and tailor the tape. Randy Brown has a massive leg reach. You know. And, you know, for this fight, for him, is going to be about keeping Dalby at range and striking at range, you know, and avoiding getting taken down. You know, Gabriel Bonfim found himself on the ground getting pieced up because, you know, Dalby, you know, he expected to probably finish Dalby early, you know, and Dalby has a lot of tenacity. He lost his last fight to Renat Krednov, you know, on the same card that Whittaker knocked out Aliskerov. that was a 29-28. That was a very close fight too. Dalby, Nicolas Dalby's 40 years old. You know, like, for his age, he's a very good fighter. But Randy Brown's 34. Randy Brown has a lot of a lot more options when it comes to. I mean, Dalby's really only the only way that Dalby's gonna win this fight is taking Brown to the ground, unless he catches him with something with enough power on it. And even then, I don't. Randy Brown has enough of a chin. But is Randy Brown a lock? I mean, how he fights this fight is, like I said, is just, he's gonna have to use front kicks and he's gonna have to strike at range, and really not let Dalby get near him. Is Dalby that dangerous? No, but Randy Brown consistently has a problem if somebody gets a hold of him, somebody who can take him to the ground. But I don't think he's gonna let that happen. I think he's faster. I think his strikes are faster. I think Randy Brown's actually a very good fighter. And honestly, just because it's very hard to see the fight for Dalby. I mean, Randy Brown would have, once again, just as I said, he would have to make so many mistakes. That I'm gonna lock Randy Brown. Alright, Michel Pereira versus Abus Magomedov. Now, this fight, a lot of people are going with Abus, I think, simply because Michel Pereira looked terrible against Anthony Hernandez. Now, the reason he looked terrible against Anthony Hernandez is because Anthony Hernandez is an elite fighter. Very elite. He'll fight for the belt at some point. Abus was broken by Sean Strickland. The thing is, Abus came into the UFC, got, I believe, a 19-second knockout over Dustin Stoltzfus, and then went on to fight Sean Strickland, right? Throwing with just as much power as he threw to knock out Stoltzfus. Sean Strickland's still there. Second round, Strickland knocks him out, right? After that, he beat Warley Alves, who hasn't beat Warley Alves, to be honest. The Bruno Ferreira submission was impressive, definitely. Now, Bruno Ferreira went on to get a submission over Armin Petrosian, which actually makes me feel like Bruno Ferreira is, improving with each fight, because, he was known, just known for first round knockouts, purely, and Abus got him to the ground and submitted him in the third round. That is not enough to make me think that he could do the same to Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira, he flatlined Ihor Pereira, did a standing backflip, landing a knee in his chest, then picked him up and submitted him by a standing guillotine in the fight before the Hernandez fight, I believe. Yes, he did all of that in 54 seconds. Before that, he submitted Michel Oleksiejczuk in 1 minute and 1 second. Knocked out Andre Petrovsky in 1 minute and 6 seconds. Ponzinibbio took him to a split decision, but I believe that was a welterweight. Yeah, Ponzinibbio was a welterweight. He did fight a welterweight for a while, including against Chaos Williams, who he beat. Michel Pereira has a very, 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 at this point, underrated grappling ability. He's not Anthony Hernandez, obviously, but I don't think Abus beats him on the ground. I think that, despite the reach disadvantage, I think he's looking for a finish right away. right away. I mean, that's how he fights. And I don't think this is gonna go to later rounds. It's hard for me to see a boost knocking him out or locking up a submission. It's just like, despite the size difference, Michel Pereira is going to be very aggressive. Probably strike to the body, probably, land an uppercut, may get him to the ground, may submit him. But I think it's Michel Pereira's fight. Unless Abu's watched the Anthony Hernandez fight and attempts to do the same thing, but I don't think that's happening. Even if it's attempted. So, taking Michel Pereira, next fight. Giga Chikadze versus David Onama. Taking David Onama. I think that Giga Chikadze, despite looking very good against Arnold Allen, people forget that Arnold Allen did not wrestle in that fight for reasons of his own, I believe. But definitely on purpose. The Alex Caceres win is, not particularly impressive. The Calvin Kattar loss was like utter destruction. Calvin Kattar, I mean, it went to the distance, but Kattar was destroying him. Giga, he was destroying him. I think that was a 50. One judge had it 50-44. And before that, and Giga, he's 36 years old. Before the Kattar loss, he knocked out Edson Barbosa, he knocked out Cub Swanson, but, his strikes are very deadly. But Onama, I think Onama's, he's got to be aware of the patterns in Giga's striking. Onama's last win is over Roberto Romero. He's beat Jonathan Pierce, knocked out Gabriel Santos. I think his only loss in the UFC is to Nate Landwehr, by majority decision. I don't know, he lost his debut fight by decision to Mason Jones. Knocked out Gabriel Benitez. He submitted Garrett Armfield, which is interesting. But Nate Landwehr loss, that was, it wasn't the Nate Landwehr that lost to Doho Choi. I mean, Landwehr was constantly giving him, things to try and defend against and mount some kind of game plan. Onama went to that fight, I believe he was trying to, he was shooting takedowns. Actually, hold on. Majority decision. That was on Vera versus Cruz. So it was it was a majority decision. You had 29-27. You had two 29-27s and one judge scored it as a draw. I can't remember this fight. Oh, I do remember this fight. Yeah, Landwehr took him down. Onama got Landwehr down once too, but Landwehr took him down 3 times. Almost locked up his submission twice. Onama did put Nate Landwehr on the ground in that fight, and he does strike with enough power to drop someone. Is he the guy to knock out Chikadze? Maybe, actually. But he could drop Chikadze, he strikes, strikes with a lot of power, and very frequently. He throws combinations. A lot of people are taking Giga. I'm gonna go with David Onama. I don't think that, I don't think he loses this fight. I think, I think the way that he strikes and, he does maraud a bit. Now, Giga is arguably his toughest opponent to date, but, you know, there's nothing about Giga Chikadze that makes me think that, you know, if Onama fights smart, like, that, you know, Giga could win. I think it's an honest fight, for sure. Alright, speaking of for sure, things that are certain, absolutely certain, like so much certainty. Anthony Smith, everybody's favorite fighter, Anthony Smith, versus Zhang Ming Yang. Anthony Smith embarrassed you, me, you know, the nation, the practice of martial arts, not just once, but fight after fight after fight. Finally, he was issued rough justice by fan favorite Dominic Reyes, who's so back. Yeah, in what I can only describe as a brutal assault in front of his family and children, because he's one of those fighters that takes his kids to his fights. Anthony Smith has looked sallow, emotional, pathetic, disgraceful in every fight he's had, going back to, let's see, I mean, on and off even before a losing streak, but, you know, I mean, he got robbed, or rather, Ryan Spahn got robbed, I would say, in their second fight, but clear Roundtree knocked out Anthony Smith. You know, he got a very lucky win over Vitor Petrino when Petrino fed his neck to Anthony Smith in one of the worst displays of, you know, just non-existent fight IQ I've ever seen. And after that, he lost to Anthony Smith. After that, lost to Roman Dolidze on short notice, up a weight class. And in his most recent and my personal favorite fight in Anthony Smith, he was stalked down and decimated by Dominic Reyes after having a decent first round, though. See, Smith has a very consistent and easily penetrated style. You know, high guard, tight, you know, literally just boxing 1-2, throw the occasional kick, you know. He can grapple, but, you know, his offense is mainly, you know, boxing. Not, you know, boxing with a kick here and there. Zhang Ming Yang is a destroyer of lives. He decimated Ozzy Diaz, Brenson Roberto. He's a road to UFC guy. Like, you know, he's, you know, the Chinese light heavyweight, the only one in the UFC, I believe. And yeah, I just see him fighting extremely aggressively. He throws a lot. He throws with power. Smith might make it to a second round, but I see it ending in, you know, KO, TKO for Zhang Ming Yang. I don't think that's even really debatable. Main event: Carlos Prates versus Ian Garry. Alright, real quick. People think that Ian Garry is going to be able to just avoid Carlos Prates for the first 2-3 rounds somehow. Ian Garry does not have finishing ability past a certain caliber of fighter, okay? Did he humiliate Neil Magny? He did. Did he finish Neil Magny? He did not. Carlos Prates did. Now, MMA trigonometry aside, the way that Ian Garry fought Jeff Neal, which was strike at range, point fight, you know, step back, circle, strike, or, you know, he's not going to be able to do that to Carlos Prates, obviously. Carlos Prates will stalk him down with such powerful striking that, you know, 25% power, slept multiple fighters. Something I noticed, by the way, Garry had a cut on his face yesterday at the ceremonial weigh-ins. That cut, which is probably from sparring and training, right? That cut isn't fully healed, which means that underneath it there are still broken blood vessels. One jab from Carlos Prates tears Garry's face open, so that's just something to know. But also, this is a fight where certain stats matter. So Garry's 6'3" with a 74.5 reach advantage, or not reach advantage, just reach. Carlos Prates is 2 inches shorter with a 3.5 inch reach advantage. Why that matters? It means that Carlos Prates is going to be able to strike to the body, without getting in too close. Garry is not going to be able to mount any kind of aggressive, offensive striking against Carlos Prates. Garry tends to, a lot of the time, if he's squared up, against somebody, throw calf kicks with very little power on them. He lost the second round to MVP on the feet. Just kind of pathetic, to be honest. Despite MVP's recent win, up a weight class. Carlos Prates sleeps people, with single shots, right? His kicking is insane. His left straights are, those are the ones that, just send people to the fucking shake ward of the hospital, But also, something else is grappling. People seem to think that Ian Garry's 3 years of, honeymooning with Charles Oliveira, while his wife, took on, all of Brazil. Not in fights. Will be sufficient enough to make him a better grappler than Carlos Prates. What still, to this day, people don't understand about fighting nerds, all of them, honestly, is that their grappling ability, their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is in their bodies. You saw that with Gene Silva against Bryce Mitchell very recently. Okay, for the most part, and obviously with Kaya Barala, but Huffy, Prates, they just simply haven't had to grapple yet. Prates' takedown defense against Neil Magny was insane. His balance and his ability to he knew exactly what to do. And Neil Magny's game plan was to rush him, thinking all this guy can do is strike. He was able to get Neil Magny off of him. He was able to finish him with seconds left in the first round. And you could say, you could talk about how Neil Magny was so beyond washed in that fight, right? Thing is, Neil Magny, what Neil Magny tried to do was Anthony Hernandez, right? That can't be done, right? Ian Garry is not. If Ian Garry gets Carlos Prates to the ground, it's Prates' fight. Now, is he going to get Carlos Prates to the ground? Almost certainly not. This fight goes to the ground, it's Prates. People don't seem to realize that. On the feet, it's Prates. Garry is not going to be able to be technical and just simply avoid Prates. That is a fantasy, okay? That would mean that Carlos Prates would have to just allow for that to happen. Now, the reason Garry was able to do that against Jeff Neal is just a speed difference. Jeff Neal also weighed 200 pounds in the octagon. I know that from, just checking fighter weight inside the octagon. It's available. MMA Junkie might have done an article about that, actually, before 298, I think. Right? Was it 298? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Carlos Prates, I don't know how much weight Carlos Prates cuts. It doesn't really matter. He's much faster. He's much more on focus. He has eyes like Pacino in the second Godfather. Michael Corleone looking through your soul. He's like a machine scanning for his openings. The Trevin Giles fight, people bring, he lost a round to Trevin Giles. I mean, he clearly understood very quickly that there's nothing Trevin Giles could do to hurt him. So, so he was like, all right, this is all this guy has. Let me line up my shot. First round ended. Technically, Giles won by outright. Slapped him in the second round with the left straight. Bang. It was over. Out cold. And, is he going to knock out Ian Garry? Quite possibly, to be honest. Quite possibly. You can only eat so many shots from Carlos Prates. And Garry doesn't defend that well, in striking exchanges. His reach disadvantage is going to be a problem, too, for him. He's going to, he throws a calf kick, his balance, the way that Garry does that, actually, is, that's a huge hole in his stand-up, consistently. He does that, he throws that calf kick, Carlos Prates goes in, hits him with that same left straight. Very possible. And Prates, and if Garry tries to run, by which I mean avoid Carlos Prates, Prates will stalk him down. I mean, it's just, Now, I don't normally bring up, weigh-ins, especially not the ceremonial weigh-ins or press conferences or anything like that, because I think a lot of that is actually, illusory if, for people who think that they're going to be able to, to tell who's going to win by a face-off. This face-off. Okay. Let me tell you something. This face-off was very significant. Why? Because Ian Garry, whether he's programmed by Layla or not, had an air of affected, fake swagger, basically. So he's in Carlos Prates' face. There's no substance there. There's nothing behind that. He's like, all right, I'm going to act like this now. Carlos Prates, he's trying to speak Portuguese, which is cringe-inducing, sad, but sad for reasons. Jesus Christ, that child's out there. But anyway, Prates is in his face going, goes, I'm ready to die. Are you ready? You ready to die? You're not ready to die, are you? Now I believe Carlos Prates. I believe it. That translates to how this fight's gonna go. Carlos Prates is ready to go in there and kill him. That's who he is. That's what he is. That's how he fights, right? Ian Garry, Ian Garry's about getting the win, which that's. When you're analyzing, a potential matchup or anything, it's like, all right, well, does that style work on this opponent? No, it doesn't. It's gonna be Carlos Prates in the main event. Do I see any holes in? Is it possible that Garry could win? I can't say no, but you try to see a fight in your head, right? You try to see the way that one fighter wins and the way the other fighter wins, right? And I can see 4 different ways that Carlos Prates wins this fight. I try to see it for Garry. You get past 2 minutes, even less, into the first round, and it just becomes television static. Because Carlos Prates would literally have to not be himself for any type of avoidance strategy to work for Garry. One last thing. I resent the assumption that smoking cigarettes equals an automatic cardio problem, which is yet to be seen in Carlos Prates. But anyway, gotta get my betting advice video done soon. It'll be shorter, round robins, all that. Yeah, sorry for this being late. Sorry, my anonymous friend is on a honeymoon, actually. His honeymoon. On a honeymoon. In Hawaii. Like, how fucking unheard of. Who's ever gone honeymooning there? Fucking redefining lack of imagination and shit. Anyway, this is actually gonna be a really good card. I can't wait for Carlos Prates to win so I can make fun of all the English fucks who, took Gary. That's you, Frankie. That's you. And no chill, my blood relative, my third cousin, mio bello cugino, taking me and Gary. It's just, it ain't gonna be like that, bro. Who else? Other people. Oh yeah, brutally honest. Oh my god, you're so fucked. Fuck. Ulysses? Yeah, you too. Shameful. Fight Fairy taking Polyana Viana, I think. That's rough. And, well, I don't know if she actually did, but, I know she took, Gutierrez. A lot of people are taking Gutierrez. I mean, that one I'm not, as sure of, but I am, actually. John Castaneda is going to beat Chris Gutierrez. Enough. Gary versus Prates in Kansas City, of all places. Maybe there'll be a tornado right after Prates sleeps him. And the ambulance taking Gary to the hospital just gets... Alright, peace.